السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أفتطمعون أن يؤمنوا لكم وقد كان فريق منهم يسمعون كلام الله ثم يحرفونه من بعد ما عقلوه وهم يعلمون. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلا بعضهم على بعض قالوا أتحدثونهم بما فتح الله عليكم ليحاجوكم به عند ربكم أفلا تعقلون. ولا يعلمون أن الله يعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. ومنهم أميون لا يعلمون الكتاب إلا أماني وإن هم إلا يظنون. فويل للذين يكتبون الكتاب بأيديهم ثم يقولون هذا من عند الله ليشتروا به ثمنا قليلا فويل لهم مما كتبت أيديهم وويل لهم مما يكسبون. صدق الله العظيم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين. ثم أما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, before sharing some reflections and insights from the ayat that we are to cover today, I wanted to share a vision with all of you and start with actually the description of a problem. And I hope that you guys will pay close attention to this, because a lot of what we do at Bayyinah is driven by these ideas. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce you to four different populations of people, four groups of people that we strongly believe need to be served as a priority. As a matter of fact, the message of the Quran, as you know, is a priority for all of humanity. But in particular, we identify 4 groups of people that really, really need this message. And if we target them, by extension, you're targeting everybody else. The first of those groups is actually women. And we believe that they are an essential population that has been ignored. I personally believe that, as in my own upbringing as a Muslim and a student of Islam, but I also believe that as a larger society, that when it comes to Islamic education and the opportunity to receive a better education and actually to produce teachers of our mothers and our sisters, that we've really fallen behind. And this is part of our turath, it's part of our legacy that was always there, and somehow over the last couple of centuries we dropped the ball and made it seem like this religion, its learning and its teaching is primarily the responsibility of men. And we made, in many societies unfortunately, we even made women feel bad for coming to the masjid and simple things like that. And that's a real tragedy, because not only are they a significant, if not a majority of our population, they are also the carriers, they are the ultimate teachers of the next generation. If our mothers are not well grounded in the religion, and they don't understand the worldview they're supposed to instill into their children, then you can forget about the next generation. And so in societies where women are denied access, for example, to the masjid, then what do you expect that next generation to do? How do you expect an entire, and even if they have access to the masjid, to not be treated like students, to not be treated like citizens even, to be treated like a fitna that is supposed to be in a closet somewhere, and if they show up, then just say, astaghfirullah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, oh my God, they have a question, why don't we give them a pen or something, and they can write it, and then they can slip it under the door, and then some kid, if he doesn't eat the paper, then they can hand it to you, and maybe you can answer their question, and make sure you put a wall, and then electrocuted fences, and then on top of that, you know, I don't know what we have this mentality towards the education of women that is problematic. And it's created a lot of problems in Muslim society. As a matter of fact, a great number of women that are, you know, many of us don't come from religious families. We're Muslims, but we don't come from very knowledgeable families or families of scholars or hufaz and things like that. And a lot of times the women in our families are scared of Islam. They're actually scared. They're like, if we become religious, that just means women are going to be like thrown inside a box or something. And that's a major tragedy. This religion is actually one that honored women in a way that I would argue women had never been honored before. And it's such a misrepresentation of our faith and of the Book of Allah that they're not given that place. So that's the first population that needs to be, a message needs to be crafted to them. And my personal belief about that, before I go to the second population, is that the best people equipped to empower a generation of women is women themselves. That until we produce educational opportunities and training opportunities for women themselves to become teachers as well, you're not going to get empowerment. You can't just keep this as men have to teach women, even though as the head of the household, my responsibility, your responsibility is to teach our families. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا. There is such a thing, and a very important piece of our future actually is to empower our daughters, our sisters, you know, even our mothers, to become teachers, to become role models. Think about this. You have a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl. Who's her role model? Who does she look up to? Who does she say, I want to be like her when I grow up? All the role models that are available to her in a world that is bombarding her with messages are role models that you would not want her to have. And that's because we didn't give her an alternative. We didn't provide her one. And that's not her fault, that's our fault. So that's the first population. The second population is actually youth. A young generation, young adults, people that are coming at an age where they have different kinds of crises. Some of them, because they're brought up in the information age, they have questions that their parents did not have about Islam. They have questions about why should we even accept the existence of a God? Why should we follow this religion? What's the sense of this Islamic law? And especially, first of all, we're in an age where all religion is being criticized, all religion is being scrutinized and made fun of, and the idea of believing in the unseen is made to seem like something absurd. Above and beyond all of that, you've got a second problem, and that is that we happen to be Muslim. Of all the religions that are attacked today, or made fun of, or criticized, or scrutinized, Islam takes the cake, it's at the top. So you already have a problem in this world today with religion, and on top of that, the religion happens to be Islam, and this young generation is brought up more exposed to a criticism of Islam than an education of Islam. So if they have doubts, and they have issues, and they have, like hesitation in really throwing themselves all wholeheartedly into the religion like their parents did, then you can't blame that generation. And they cannot be talked to or spoken to or educated in the way that their parents were educated. They need a new kind of education because they have new kinds of questions. They have new kinds of problems. And that needs to be respected and studied. And they need to be addressed in a medium, in language, and in a format that honors them, that actually considers them. The second problem within this population, the first population was what again, just so I know you're paying attention? Was women. The second is youth, right? On the one hand, there are youth that have doubts, but on the other, the flip side of this equation is another entirely amazing but dangerous group of youth that are finding Islam. They are young people that were not religious at all, and then Allah put something in their heart and they found Islam. And when they find Islam, that's when they want to change everything about their life. They want to make up for all of their past sins, and they just want to be a better person now. They want to be in the complete submission to Allah. But this is the danger, because at that age, at that young, very vulnerable age, whoever comes along and presents them, this is what Islam is, this is what you must do, they're going to take it wholeheartedly, not question anything. And right now there are elements in the Muslim world and in the world that are teaching a message of Islam that is purely insane, but very powerful. And their marketing machinery, their media machinery, their savvy, their ability to manipulate young minds is incredible. It's actually something to note how powerful and how manipulative they can be to a 16-year-old, to a 14-year-old, to an 18-year-old. And so before those good young Muslim men and women that want to learn more about their religion, before one of these forces catches them and snatches them and pulls them in and completely hypnotizes them, and they end up making decisions in their life that they're going to regret, and they go into one extreme or the other, it's essential that we target that young population that is seeking the message of Islam and give them something that gives them real answers. That doesn't shy away from the book. We're not trying to give them a watered-down version of Islam. We're trying to teach all humanity a genuine, thought-provoking, evidence-based, reasoning-based approach to our religion that they find satisfaction in. And they don't feel like, well, these guys are shying away from the tough questions. And those extreme people, with their messages, they tell it like it is. We can't accept that. And I'm not here to counter any group, but we're saying unless we provide a healthy alternative, we're the only ones to blame. So the second population was youth. The third population is curious non-Muslims. Curious non-Muslims. And these are people around the world, a majority of people who have now become curious about Islam because of all the bad press, which is actually a blessing in disguise. I call it a blessing in disguise because Musa alayhi salam did not have broadcast media under his control. But you know who controlled the media of the time? Fir'aun did. And Fir'aun went around advertising that he is a threat to civilization. Like he actually introduced all of Egypt to Musa alayhi salam, for Musa alayhi salam, as the enemy that you should be careful about. The problem with that is for a lot of people, when you say something is very, very bad, don't go near it, it's evil, it's horrible, then guess what happens to them? They get curious. The one thing you don't tell them not to go near, they want to know more about, right? So more copies are sold when Muslims are berated of the Quran than ever before, right? People are curious about this religion. And so as a result, we have people that have, just like the women and the youth, they have genuine questions too. And they have questions that have either been fed to them by media, that's not their fault, or they have questions of their own. Why do you people are the way you are? And they need to be given an adequate answer also. And they need to be engaged in civil conversation. And we cannot just assume, oh, the West is against us, or the modern media is against us, or the governments are against us. The world is far more complicated than one stroke, and everybody is just the West. There's lots of people with lots of very different personalities and different curiosities, and that needs to be respected. That's our third population. And our fourth population, I like to call them Muslims on the fence, Muslims on the edge. And basically, these are Muslims that are born Muslim maybe, that became Muslim maybe, and over time, they did not acquire, they didn't have the opportunity, the means, or maybe even the interest or the will to acquire an education in the religion. That's not their fault. They were busy in their career or college or university or family life, whatever else. And now they've come to a point where because of the world we live in, they have questions about their religion too. They have lots of very different questions. And they are afraid to ask those questions to their imam or their teachers, their ulama, because if they ask those questions, somebody might just call them a kafir. And say, you don't even, astaghfirullah, how can you ask that question? How can we, and they feel bad about themselves because they don't practice the way they see people of the masjid practice. They don't see themselves as religious, and they've basically kind of given up on themselves and saying, we're not good Muslims anyway. Those are good Muslims, but those guys are pretty extreme. I'm even scared to talk to them. And so they distance themselves from what you could call a religious community. They become a community of their own. These are actually, I would argue, the vast majority of Muslims today. The vast majority of Muslims today are not at a masjid tonight. They're not. They're actually intimidated by even the idea of coming to a masjid. For them to come, it's actually a big decision. Like, people are going to look at me funny. They're going to judge me. I don't even know if I want to go there. Somebody's probably going to say something. They're terrified. These are Muslims, terrified to come to a gathering of Muslims in the house of Allah. And that's, again, I believe, our fault. We did not open up this space, and we did not open up a dialogue with people that isn't judgmental or intimidating or difficult. So I've identified 4 populations for you. Let's go over them again. I talked about women. I talked about what else? Youth. The third population was curious non-Muslims, and then Muslims on the fence. They're just literally hanging by a thread, right? And if we continue to not answer their questions, or answer their questions with astaghfirullah al-azim, a'udhu billah, I think you're possessed, then they're basically on their way out. They're on their way out. And if they're not on their way out, their next generation definitely is. Their children definitely are. So these are 4 very serious populations that have to be addressed. And if you cater your message, if you talk with these people in mind, if you talk and you give the message of the Quran with these people in mind, you'll be surprised. The Quran actually has satisfying answers, more than satisfying answers for all of these groups in ways that no other message can carry. That's part of the miracle of the Book of Allah. And that's why at this organization, I personally believe, and by extension our entire group believes, in creating messaging that reaches these groups of people in a way that is easy for them to take in. And it's easy for them to absorb over time. We don't expect them to come to us. We expect ourselves to go to them. Whatever it takes. If it takes creative media, if down the road it means we have to produce films and animations, if that means that we have to talk to movie directors, so be it. If it means we have to engage in talk shows and discussion panels and not just lectures, because not everybody's interested in lectures, so be it. That needs to be done. And so part of our vision, now I get to the vision. I've identified 4 groups. I quickly want to talk to you about what we think we can do to help. What we think we can do to help. There's 2 parts of it. One part of it, I like to call it media. Okay, media. And media is basically now in your handheld devices. Media is now beaming all over the world via the internet, right? So it's an open playing field. So if we have an opportunity to create effective, powerful, quality media, the kind of media that can gain momentum all over the world, then we need to engage in this battlefield with those targeted populations in mind. That's number 1. And for the first time, we have an opportunity in the Muslim world that we can reach a global audience in a strategic way like they've never been reached before, without any borders, without any restrictions. We have a really powerful opportunity before us. Bayyina, alhamdulillah, has enjoyed quite a bit of success in the social media scene, like Facebook and all, these platforms, YouTube and whatever else. But I tell you, that's just the tip of the iceberg. No matter how much you think one of my lectures has hits on YouTube or whatever, compare that to a song. Like, it's nothing. Like, we need to compete with the entertainment media. We need to compete with the top media of our age and reach those numbers, reach those populations. And that's when you know you're hitting the world. And we can. If you can reach 2 million, there's no reason you can't believe you can't reach 20 million or 200 million for that matter. Because if there are 2 million people out there that saw benefit in something, I can guarantee you there's 100 more for each one of them that's out there that just doesn't know yet. And that's part of our work, is actually creating the kind of materials that can reach those people. Within the short term, I want to tell you, and this is still the first part of our solution, which is media, I want to tell you what I'm interested in doing. What I'm interested in doing is actually gathering scholars, experts from around the world, people that I consider top-notch in their field of Islamic studies, the humanities, other spaces, and actually bring them in on panel discussions. I don't claim to be a scholar, I'm a student at best. But I am a curious and a very abrupt student. I like to ask questions very directly. I actually want to take these scholars and these experts and have panel discussions with them and ask them the toughest questions that are being asked to Muslims and by Muslims today. and hash some things out for the benefit of the entire ummah. And I don't want to be like, Shaykh, please tell me about taqwa. And then the Shaykh will 20 minutes tell me about taqwa, and I'll say, I like it. Let's move on to Iman. No. Shaykh, let's have a conversation about slavery. Let's talk about multiple marriages. Let's talk about inheritance law in Islam. Let's talk about this, that, whatever. People have questions. And they see some things literally as unfair within the religion. Let's actually respect their question and put it out. And if they give an answer and say, well, you just have to have taqwa, well, that's not enough. I need a better answer than that. I need to hash this out. Because that's not going to fly for a 16-year-old. Let's iron this stuff out. And there are people smart enough in the world. They don't have the platform, but alhamdulillah, we do. We do. And we're going to create that platform where it's not just about me doing durus, but it's actually about getting these great minds of the ummah. That I've met some of these people, wallahi, they've changed the way I look at the world. But they're not speakers, they're not scholars, and you're probably not going to find them on YouTube. They're hidden somewhere in a university teaching 15 students, and I go there and I get upset. You need to be in front of the world. What are you doing sitting here teaching 15 students? This is a disgrace to the ummah that you're just sitting here and you're not being taken advantage of. That's the platform that I'm looking to create. That's the media side of things. In addition, I want to be able to, inshallah ta'ala, myself and my colleagues be able to do exhaustive research on the Quran, and like these durus that are going on, the purpose of them is to do a lot of research and to explain this stuff in as easy language as possible. So even if somebody doesn't have a lot of background in Islamic studies, they can get it. If they want a journey into the Quran, I'd like to be able to facilitate their journey. I'm not saying this is the last thing they'll learn about the Quran, but I'm saying that we can try to make this an effective first step. So from here on, when they move forward in their journey, they have a good foundation from which to build, right? And this resource can be used, inshallah ta'ala, eventually for schools, for youth groups, for halaqat, for people that want to give a khutbah, other areas, right? That's the media side of things. Now I'll quickly move along to the even equally exciting. Media is kind of like a satellite beaming down, like I told you. That's the work, you can say it's from the top down. But work also needs to happen from the bottom up. There's top down and there's bottom up. Bottom up means you have to produce people. You have to train people. You have to educate people. You have to cultivate people. You have to identify talented people that you can look at. You know how they do sports scouting? They see this kid playing on the street and say, this guy needs to be in the NBA. That kid is a professional cricketer. Or he needs to be on the football team. That's what scouts do. They see this raw talent and they're like, if this person was given a chance, they could make a big impact in the world. That's literally what I want to do. As I travel, I identify young people and scholars that are just incredible talents. And now it's time to invest in them, to train them, to educate them, to even further their education down the road. There are students of the Bayyina Institute that I taught Arabic to that came from different backgrounds that I saw potential in, and we as an institute funded their education in Islamic studies. Some of them are now doing their PhDs in Islamic studies in particular fields so that they can be better assets to the ummah. We cannot move forward if we don't invest in people. But you cannot just invest in people online. You have to actually bring them under one roof, see them in action, identify their creativity and their talents, see which ones really are you could see the diamond in the rough and say, this one's a diamond, this one needs to be invested in. This one needs to be put work into. And give them a path. That needs to happen. And that's actually the goal of, the first step of that is this building that we're trying to build. And to finish off, the auditorium is going to be used, inshallah ta'ala, for durus of the Quran and for the kind of talk show settings that I spoke to you about. I plan on inviting world caliber scholars here and having them have a sit down, because like for years, if I tried to do this kind of thing, you have to rent a hall, you have to get a production crew, you have to get people flying into a particular place. There are expense on top of expense on top of expense just to have a conversation at a quality that you can air and you can even put it on TV, But we want to be able to do that level of work here, and do it efficiently, inshallah ta'ala. That's one piece of the equation. The other piece of the equation is this is, inshallah ta'ala, a campus where students are being trained, and some are being trained to become teachers. So that this work and this one building that's here, I envision in the next decade, there are dozens of these all over the world. This exact work of proliferating the message of the Quran is happening in Malaysia, it's happening in the UK, it's happening in Australia, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Turkey, and it's happening in the local languages as well. It needs to happen in the local languages. I envision that this work of the Quran needs to happen in all of the major languages of the Muslim world. It needs to happen. These durus that I'm doing, inshallah, I want to identify talent much better than myself that can do it in Punjabi. They're much better than myself. And then they do it. And then when they're done with it, imagine like, I mean, I'm crazy about this stuff, but like, imagine one of these devices, right, with the entire dars of the Quran loaded in, Punjabi or in Bahasa or in some other language, and it's passed down to mothers in villages where there's no internet. And they're literally, these moms, they're making the bread in the morning and they're listening to dars of the Quran, transforming their minds and hearts. You know what that's an investment in? That's not just an investment in those women. It's an investment in their kids. You could see the results of that in a decade. The kinds of teenagers they're going to raise. There's a different caliber of kids because they grew up with Quran in their ears, the message of the Quran in their ears. This is a powerful, powerful thing that we believe in. Work from the bottom up and from the top down. And it's something that the West needs. It's something that the East needs. Wallahi, wherever I go, there's a big gap between the ummah and a love or an access to the word of Allah. And really, that's at the end of the day the mission of this organization. And that's why we put this drive up. I said, let's just do durus every night. My personal philosophy has always been, if you're going to ask the ummah for something, you should give a lot more back, right? And you just give and give and give. And our intention is to continue to give. And I'm hoping that through this foundation, we're able to make materials available that don't just hit Facebook, that don't just hit, YouTube, but we make stuff at a caliber and we have the kind of following that we don't have to ask BBC and CNN and whoever else that, give us a chance to air some of our stuff. They ask us. We want to get to the point where the Muslims are the loudest voice on Islam. We have a chance to do that. We can be the loudest voice on ourselves. Right now, when you see what is the message about the Quran, the people that are talking about the Quran that are the most heard are not the Muslims. We want to be those people. That when questions are asked about the Quran, the first in line, the first results on Google, the top hits on social media websites, and the top players in the media scene are actually experts that represent the deen in an intelligent way, not people who hate Islam to begin with. And they're talking on behalf of the Quran. So this is just a vision that I wanted to share with all of you. Alhamdulillah, our drive is nearly done. And if those of you who believe in this cause and want to see it fulfilled, inshallah ta'ala, contribute with an open heart. There's only a few days left. I won't be making this kind of a long pledge again. But I just personally just wanted to share with you how insanely I and my team believe in this work. And wallahi al-azim, if there is all the support in the world and there's no support at all, we're still going to be doing this. And we believe we can. I am so convinced that this is the work to do in our day and age. The battle is not a battle of the military, it's not the battle of territory, it's not the battle of economics. Today is the battle of influence. It's the battle of media. And if we're not winning that battle, then all the other battles don't matter. You can win whatever territory you want. If you don't carry the right influence, and there's nothing better to influence humanity than the word of Allah. That's at the end of the day the mission. So now inshallah ta'ala I come back to the dars bi'idhnillah of Surat al-Baqarah. Just make dua. Even if you can't contribute, what we're asking of you in this special night is dua at the end of the day. Just make dua that Allah allows us to serve His book in a way that fits Him. That does some justice to this book. Because at the end of the day, we can't do that. But if we can just even, رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا, just some efforts are accepted from Allah, then that's enough. That's enough, to save ourselves. Now, we studied yesterday the example of the three kinds of what? Hearts that were compared with three kinds of rocks. You remember? I wanted to share with you that this is actually خَاطِبُ النَّاسَ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِم. Address people in accordance with their intellect. What did Allah Azza wa Jal do? He's giving this example of three kinds of rocks to Banu Israel. And if you recall the summary of the image, one rock exploded, the other cracked open with a little bit of water, and the third one fell. All three of these are actually something not just imagined by the Israelites, this is something part of their living memory. Why? Because when Musa alayhi salam struck the staff, what happened? Water gushed out. That's actually something they can easily relate to. فَانْفَجَرَتْ مِنْ هُثْنَتَا عَشْرَةَ عَيْنًا. We saw that. Later on, as a result of their sins, that water, it didn't used to come out like a river. It used to come out only a little bit. Like the shaqquk would happen, and only a little bit of water used to come out. فَانْبَجَسَتْ, like in Surah Al-A'raf. A little bit of water came out. 12 springs were there, but they got weaker. And that's kind of like the second example. And in the third case, what did we see about Allah Azza wa Jal raising the mountain above them or shaking the mountain and the rocks are falling? And the third image is that of rocks falling from the fear of Allah. So this is actually something that resonates and connects with the psyche of the Israelites, that for whom these incidents are a major part of their memory. And so Allah draws on that to give them the example of Iman, subhanAllah. Now Allah turns His attention to the Muslims. The entire conversation so far has been with the Israelites. We are kind of an audience to this conversation. But now Allah flips and He directly starts talking to you and me, the Ummah. He says, أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ? Are you hopeful? Are you actually hopeful that they are going to accept what you're saying? You know, He turns to us, why? The Sahaba in Medina, the Muslims living in Medina. He tells them, look, you came from Makkah. And in Makkah, your audience was the people of Quraysh. And the people of Quraysh have no knowledge of a book. They have no knowledge of prophets. They worship idols. They have a completely different religious worldview. You were optimistic that when you come to Medina, these are Ahlul Kitab, these are people of the book. They know what a prophet is. They know what Allah is. They know these things. So when we give them this message, it's a much easier sell to them, because they already have background information. They have prerequisites. Plus, our prophet is mentioned in their books, so this is a done deal. They're going to hear about it and they're totally going to accept. They're not as tough of a sale as the people of Quraysh who said even, Mar-Rahman. What's this Ar-Rahman? Like, we don't know what that is. They're not going to ask these questions. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, actually, you assumed that because they have knowledge, that they're going to just willingly come to you open-hearted. No. What did Allah just explain? They saw the dead come back to life. They saw water part. They saw springs come out. Did that affect them? No. And Allah says their hearts had become hard, even with Musa alayhi salam. You think after them not sparing Musa alayhi salam, and hearing of all of this, you're noticing some parallels between the historical Israelites and the ones that are in the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they're the ones being criticized. You're acting like your historical ancestors. Why are you doing that? Why are your hearts becoming so hard? And so Allah turns to the Muslims and says, are you actually hopeful they'll accept what you're saying? وَقَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. And there had already been a group among them that used to listen to the speech of Allah. ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِن بَعْدِ مَا عَقَلُوهُ. Then they used to change it even after having understood it. Very curious statement. Listen to it again. Are you actually going to believe, you actually think they're going to accept what you're saying, while a group among them used to hear the speech of Allah and used to edit it, alter it, change it, replace it, even after they had understood it? Now, the first curious thing about this statement is the word fariq. قَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ. Allah says they're not going to listen to you because a group among them used to change the book after hearing it. The question arises, how can you blame an entire nation for the crimes of one group? Allah could have said, they all heard it. They all changed it. But the fact of the matter is, Allah is only blaming a small group of them that used to hear the word of Allah and then deliberately edit it. يُحَرِّفُونَهُ يعني التغيير والتبديل وأصله من الانحراف الشيء والتحريف الشيء الانحراف عن الشيء. Move it from its place. You know, Imam Amin Ahsan Islah, he gave examples of this. In the Jewish, in his book, actually his teacher, Hamiduddin Farahi rahimahullah, amazing book. I hear it's been translated into English and into Arabic. I still haven't gotten a copy. When I do, I'll publicize it. Very important book. The book is called Ar-Ra'yu Sahih fi man huwa dhabih. The correct position on who was to be slaughtered. Meaning Ibrahim alayhi salam had a dream to slaughter his son. Muslims believe it's Ismail alayhi salam. The majority of us believe it's Ismail alayhi salam. And the Jewish position is it's Isaac. It's Ishaq that is to be slaughtered. And you might think, who cares? I mean, he didn't get slaughtered. It was a cow instead or a ram instead. So what does it matter? It's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal. Why? Because the entire belief system that came after as a result from the Jewish tradition, and by a byproduct of it, the Christian tradition, especially nowadays, Protestant Christianity, they actually believe Isaac was chosen because Isaac was the blessed son, and Ishmael was not chosen because he's the cursed son. So all of his children are cursed, and the religion that came from the children of Ishmael is Islam, which is a cursed religion of the devil because he's from the cursed line. All of it started with who was to be slaughtered. When you question that, you question the foundation of this entire line of thinking. This entire line of thinking. A lot of Zionism is actually rooted, religious Zionism is rooted in this one thing. Like it's the root of a lot of problems in the world. So what does Hamiduddin Farahi do? He studies Hebrew for 8 years because he wants to study the original text. What a gangster. Rahimahullah. He is so awesome. Like this man is my hero. Like he's so amazing. And then after doing this research, he writes a book, Ar-Ra'yu Sahih fi man huwa dhabih, the correct position in who was supposed to be slaughtered. And what does he do in this book? 3 sections. One section, how does the Quran prove that it's Ismail alayhi salam? Then how does the Torah actually also prove that it's Ismail alayhi salam? And then scholars of the Hebrew tradition that actually held the opinion that it was Ismail alayhi salam. The guy studied Hebrew so he can go inside of their sources. And he put this thing together. And he wrote it, he's an Indian scholar, rahimahullah, wrote it in Arabic. So awesome. But what and like I said, it's been translated, and apparently an updated version of it has also been put together. I believe it's called Ishmael and Isaac. When I get my hands on a copy, I'll publicize it, inshallah ta'ala. But the reason I'm bringing it up under this ayah is as follows. The Hebrew Bible, he actually quoted the Hebrew in his book. It's an Arabic book, and when he gets to the Hebrew ayah from their book, he writes the Hebrew in. Right? And then he spells it out in Arabic. And he says, they say that Abraham took his son, to Isaac, to slaughter him at a rock near Mura. And they write the Hebrew word Mura, which is actually just a slant over from Marwa. Marwa as in Safa and Marwa, you know. And they say this was actually between 2 hills, the 2 hills of Shifa and Mura. Really? Shifa and Mura? In a dried up valley called Sakka. Sakka, really, Sakka. I mean, just little stance here and there, and they changed the word from where it used to be. Is this the common person doing it? No. This is their scholars doing it. This is their scholars. When Allah says a group among them used to hear the word of Allah and used to change it, even after having understood it. Who is he pointing the finger at? Their scholars. Now, why are you blaming the entire nation? Like these people are not going to believe what you're saying because their scholars are corrupt. That's basically what Allah is saying. That's not fair. The scholars are corrupt. What about the rest of the people? Allah Azza wa Jalla is here highlighting a very deep problem of religious psychology. When a nation becomes weak when their relationship with their book becomes weak. And how do you know that a nation has a weak relationship with their book, with the book of Allah? That happens when the book of Allah is only studied and understood by the scholars. And the vast majority of Muslims say, I don't need to know, I'll just go ask a scholar. I'll ask a sheikh. I don't need to know what the ayah says. I don't need to know what the surah says. That's not my problem. I'm not a sheikh. And then the shuyukh will also come along, like the shuyukh of Bani Israel would come along and say, hey, you have no business reading Torah yourself. You'll get misguided. You will go to Jahannam because you will misunderstand it. If you have a question, come to me and I will tell you what it says. As a matter of fact, don't even read it yourself and ask questions. I'll just tell you everything you need to know. Keep a distance from the Quran because it'll misguide you. Wallahi al-azim. This is the greatest trick of shaitan in the history of religion. The revelation that came to connect every human being to Allah, now we're being fed, you can only go through scholars. I'm not undermining the value of scholarship. You have to understand though what the role of scholarship is. The role of scholarship is as follows. You, the public, I'm not a scholar either, me, the public, we're supposed to be informed consumers. We're students. We cannot be non-students. Everybody's supposed to be a student. And as students, you have the right to ask questions when you don't understand something. You can say, how can we believe this? Where did this come from? How did this get there? And you're supposed to be curious and ask those questions. And whose responsibility is it to give you those answers in a satisfying fashion? The scholars. And they're supposed to not just give you the answer, they're supposed to show you how they arrived at the answer. So if they give you an answer and you say, well, I'm not convinced, how did you arrive at this answer? They're not allowed to get offended. They're not allowed to say, I'm a alim, you're not, shut up. They're not allowed to say that. And so what happens in their scholarship? In the Jewish mind, this is actually far more extreme than the Ummah ever became. But in their history what happened? Their scholars would write an opinion. An opinion is actually somebody's best attempt at understanding something. They would write an opinion, and the next generation would actually believe that the opinion of a rabbi is equal to the law of God. Their fatwa is equal to Islam itself. So disagreeing with the rabbi, and by the way, then they had other ulama with other opinions. And they kept collecting all these opinions. For any one issue, they have 100 different opinions. And they say, follow any one of them because they are all from Allah. All of these opinions are from Allah. Why? Because they came from scholars. Because scholars can't go wrong. The scholars actually became divine in a sense. And that's why the Quran says that they took their scholars, their rabbis and their priests as gods besides Allah. They didn't worship them, but they took law from them like they're taking law from Allah Himself. They took halal and haram from them without question like they would take it from Allah Himself. So now, even after they're making these changes, and then let me tell you, take you back to the Muslim psyche, because today if there's nothing else you understand, just understand this problem. A very deep problem in religious psychology that hits any ummah, even the Muslim ummah. We are people of benefit of the doubt. We say he's a alim, how could he be a bad person? How, he wouldn't say something wrong. He wouldn't do that. And then of course, there's a class of people who call themselves scholars. Their only business is the following: to tell you, don't listen to this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, because they're not real scholars. And you better only listen to me if you want to be saved, because I speak the haqq. I'm going to tell you what Quran says, what Sunnah says. Everybody else, watch out. If you want to save yourself, here's the website that you always go to. Don't go anywhere else. Here's the book you read and nothing else. Here's the manual that'll teach you. And they create this cult where you're not, and if you question them, then you're out too. Then they'll write a warning about you because you asked a question. That's one part of their business. The other part of their business is that literally this: they hear the word of Allah and they offer one of its interpretations, whether that interpretation actually meets the text or not. And over time, a mafia is formed. And I use the word mafia on purpose. What's in a mafia? You have to, if you're in it, you can't disagree with the boss. So if you have a student from within some school, and he says, my school of thought, my teachers taught me this opinion, but I'm not convinced. Quran is telling me something else. Sunnah is telling me something else. Evidence is telling me something else. History is telling me something else. I cannot agree with this fatwa. I can't, in good conscience. He'll tell you that in a private dinner. He can't tell you that openly. I can't, my elders have said that I can't disagree with this. Where are your loyalties? So it becomes that the word of the elders becomes the word of Allah. And so Allah says, this in the worst case was with Bani Israel. Now please, as you hear this, don't form the other extreme. The other extreme is all scholars are corrupt. I don't want anything to do with scholars. Astaghfirullah, they're just like the rabbis of Bani Israel. These are extremes. And ignorant people love either going into one extreme and coming out and going into another extreme. Like the ummah today, if we love a scholar, oh my God, we're obsessed with this scholar. We can't hear any criticism of him. But once he falls in our eyes, he's basically Iblis. Now I don't want to hear anything about him. Don't even say his name. Astaghfirullah. I have to make wudu again. Like that's... Do you deal with any human being this way? Human beings are people that make mistakes. And scholars are no different. And every field in which there is influence or a concentration of knowledge is subject to corruption. Lawyers can be corrupt because they understand the law. Mechanics can be corrupt because they understand the car better than you. Construction people can be corrupt. Contractors can be corrupt because they say, I need this material, this material. You don't know any better, you'll have to trust them. Scholars are no different. If you're in a position, just because it's religion doesn't mean that there's no room for corruption. There is. But at the same time, are there good people in these fields as well? Yes. And so there are always going to be sincere, genuine scholars that are actually, and you'll know one of the qualities of genuine scholarship is that they are far more student than they are teacher. They're just in a lifelong engagement of learning. And that's how you can tell the mark of a scholar, So ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا عَقَلُوهُ. They edit it even after they've come to understand it. They understand what it really means, but they still can't get themselves to say it. وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. And they're the ones who know. In other words, knowledge is being kept with them. If they don't send it out, if they don't give it out, the public's not going to have it. And so in this ayah, Allah is actually directly blaming one group and indirectly blaming another group. Directly, He's blaming corrupt scholarship. Indirectly, He's blaming the public who trusts them with anything without asking any questions. A completely blind, trusting public. We don't interrogate our scholars, but we do engage in reasonable, rational, civil conversation with them. That transparency needs to be there for an ummah to be secure from corruption. And so, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. The general public, this ayah now builds on this idea. When they come to those who believe, they say, we believe too. A Jew from Medina listens to his rabbi talk about the final prophet, Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, then he sees Rasulullah ﷺ and says, hey, that's exactly the lecture I heard. He's exactly the same guy. And he goes and talks to one of the Sahaba and says, he's a prophet of yours? I think it's the same one we heard about in our book. I've heard so many speeches about him. It all matches up. Now this is a common Jew talking to a common Muslim in Medina. They're just having this casual conversation. So when they come to you, they say, I think we're pretty much on the same page. We accept all this stuff that you're saying. We've been hearing this for a long time. وَإِذَا خَلَا بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ. Then they go happily to the rabbi, running off to the rabbi, and they go in private company. Rabbi, guess what? I think that prophet you told us about, he's here. And I was talking to some of his followers. It's totally what you said. It's exactly the same man. And so then they get a lecture from their rabbi. Why did you go tell them? Don't go talk to them again. You'll get confused. If you know what's good for you, just stay here. I'll tell you if it's right or wrong. Don't go asking questions yourself. And so before I finish the ayah, I want to read something to you from Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, who observed this phenomenon in Medina. المروي عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن منافقي أهل الكتاب كانوا إذا لقوا أصحاب محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم قالوا لهم آمنا بالذي آمنتم به. Ibn Abbas says these people of the people of the book, especially the Jews, used to come to the Muslims in Medina and say, we believe in exactly the same thing. وَنَشْهَدُ أَنَّ صَاحِبَكُمْ صَادِقٌ. We're willing to testify. We're pretty sure that your companion, by which they mean the Prophet, your companion is telling the truth. وَأَنَّ قَوْلَهُ حَقٌّ وَنَجِدُهُ بِنَعْتِهِ وَصِفَتِهِ فِي كِتَابِنَا. And we find him with his exact description and his exact qualities in our book. ثُمَّ إِذَا خَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ قَالَ الرُّؤَسَاءُ لَهُمْ. And when they went in private company to their own, among themselves, the heads of them, their chiefs, their leaders said, أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي كِتَابِهِ مِنْ نَعْتِهِ وَصِفَتِهِ لِيُحَاجُّكُمْ بِهِ. Are you guys honestly going to the Muslims and talking to them about how you have in common with them these descriptions that I talked to you about in the book? فإن المخالف إذا اعترف بصحة التوراة واعترف بشهادة التوراة على نبوة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم فلا حجة أقوى من ذلك. If someone who doesn't even believe in the Prophet comes over to a Muslim and says, that's the one in our books, there's no better case than that. We didn't have to go prove it to you. You're coming and confessing it yourselves. If you go and do this, then you're not just making yourself look bad, you're making me look bad. Now I don't have a choice but to accept. The rabbi is yelling at him and saying, if you go and say, I gave lectures about Muhammad, that you should accept him, and now you went and told them, then you're killing me here, man. And so the exact language of the Quran, remarkable, he says, أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ. Are you going and engaging in conversation with them, starting up a chat with them? It's interesting, so interesting. If you say, أَتَتَحَدَّثُونَ إِلَيْهِمْ, are you talking with them? That could mean they started the conversation and you responded. But if you say أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ التَّفْعِيل, it means you started the conversation. Meaning the Jewish community got so intrigued by the Quran, they couldn't help but engage the Muslims in conversation. They went and talked to them. And they got yelled at for starting the conversation. بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. And you're talking to them because of what Allah has opened to you. In other words, Allah has given you the insight to see that what you've heard from me matches with what you hear from them. لِيُحَاجُّكُمْ بِهِ. Are you doing this so they can start arguing against you? They don't just want to see commonalities in our faith. If you just show them commonalities, they're not going to just sit back and say, well, I'm glad we find this common ground. Now you go back to the synagogue and I'll go to the mosque. They're going to say, you should accept. There's not just a casual, hey, I'm glad we have stuff in common, now let's eat cookies together. They're going to put some pressure on you. They're going to want you to, do you want to become Muslim now? Is that what you're saying? لِيُحَاجُّكُمْ بِهِ عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ. They're going to make a case against you with your God. They're going to invoke your God and say, you must now accept this religion. This is not just a casual conversation about commonalities. How interesting. We have prayer like yours too. It's so fascinating. Yeah. I'm really glad we talked about this because our book is really similar to yours. Good talk. It's not just that. They're going to actually come, they're going to make a case. And then he's scaring them. He's saying, listen, they're going to make you convert either here, they're going to make a case against you, and if they don't make a case against you here, when you come before Allah, they will complain about you. Now this is strange. If the rabbi is telling them, you should not become Muslim, because if you go tell them what you know, then they will have a case against you to make عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ before your master, meaning on Judgment Day. Some have done the ta'wil of this on Judgment Day. Then shouldn't that make them want to convert? Like if they have a case against them on Judgment Day, they should want to run and actually be accepted or accept Islam so they don't have a case against themselves on Judgment Day. Who wouldn't want to be saved on Judgment Day? But actually if you study, like Ibn Ashur rahimahullah was baffled by this problem in At-Tahwir wa Tanwir, why the exact argument that should compel someone to accept Islam is being made to convince them to not accept Islam. Why? Because the concept of God that was developed in the Jewish tradition based on the stories and the accounts was so twisted and so out there. It was so wrong that they actually inherently adopted the notion that Allah is not all-knowing. Listen to me again. They developed the idea that Allah is not all-knowing. It started even with Ishaq alayhi salam. Ishaq alayhi salam is on his deathbed according to the Torah's twisted version. He's about to die. He has an older son named Isu, and his younger son is named Yaqub. Yaqub is the one we know. Isu is the one we've never heard of because he's only mentioned in Torah. And Ishaq, the father, is about to die. And he says to his son Isu, I'm about to die, but before I do, go and prepare a meal and slaughter an animal and bring it to me so I can bless you so you can become a prophet. And Isu was from a different wife, and Ishaq was from Yaqub was from a different wife. And Yaqub's mother overheard from the kitchen that the father is about to bless Isu. And she brings Yaqub and says, go boy, hurry up, slaughter an animal, bring the food, and put on your brother's clothes, Isu's clothes, and try to sound like him, and just put your hand forward so he'll see the clothes because he's too sick to see you, and he'll bless you instead. And he'll make dua for you to become a prophet instead. Because I want you to have prophethood, I don't want Isu to have prophethood. So Yaqub says, no, I don't think I'm qualified, I don't think this is a good idea. And mother says, do what I tell you. And he goes and he slaughters an animal, comes back, hands the hand to his father, Ishaq. Ishaq doesn't realize what he's doing. He gives prophethood unknowingly to Yaqub alayhi salam. Isu comes back with an animal, says, Dad, I'm ready to get blessed. He says, I already blessed your brother, I'm sorry. This is actually the Tawrat's account. Like Allah does not know, حَيْثُ يَجْعَلُ رِسَالَتَهُ, Quran says. Allah knows better where to place His prophethood. Where to place His They actually developed the idea that you can con Allah. That you can actually, don't tell them. Because if you tell them, then the judge is Allah and they'll have evidence. If you don't give them the evidence, then Allah won't have anything to argue with. And they're like, oh, okay, I won't talk to them again. And so, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, they told their own followers, why don't you think? You're going to lose the case. This way, keep it secret and it won't come out. Can you imagine how far from the teachings of even about Allah they came? And that's just one example that he gave, Ibn Ashur. He gave several examples from Tawrat where they undermine the knowledge of Allah. So what is the next ayah? It corrects this corrupted notion of the Tawrat. أَوَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ, don't they already know? Shouldn't they already know? أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ, that Allah knows what they hide. Allah knows what they make secret. And Allah knows the pronouncements, the public statements that they make. Don't they already know that Allah knows all of these things? Allah is now questioning not just that they challenge Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and undermine him. They're even willing to undermine Allah, to have corrupt notions about Allah. And Allah challenges them openly. And so now this was if the best of them, their rabbis, are this corrupt, What are you going to accept from their gullible population who's handed the entire religion over to the rabbis? They don't care to study it, they just lean on the rabbis. And they're not off the hook. And that's why the next ayah is about the rest of the population. This has to be learned by the ummah. Why? Because you're going to have people. Alhamdulillah, we don't have the level of corruption. Even in our scholarship, whenever there's corruption, it's not to the point where our scholars believe Allah is not all-knowing. We're not at that level, alhamdulillah. But there is certainly the kind of corruption that keeps scholars from speaking out the truth, even when they see it in front of their face. Because there are political considerations, economic considerations, social considerations, school of thought considerations, allegiances, loyalties, jobs, imam positions. They're going to get shaken if I don't say. Simple things. There's an imam who's, look, what you're convinced of is a amana on you. The imam is convinced that Eid is tomorrow. The board member comes and says, look, if you want your job, Eid is the day after tomorrow. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, but I only have a day off on Sunday. I can't afford Monday, so you need to announce. The imam says, actually, I can't do that. I saw the moon sighting. I'm pretty sure it's... No, but we really want you to have a good future here at the Islamic Center. Think about your children. There's difference of opinion. You can slip by. Now this may be a mukhtalaf fihi issue. This may be an issue of disagreement. It's possible. But on the conscience of that scholar, when he had to weigh his income and the pressure from an employer as opposed to what he's convinced of to be true, then what's the point of being a representative of this deen? What's the point then? If you have to sell your conscience. And this is you could think this is a small issue. It's not a small issue when it's a matter of conviction, and when it's a matter of principle. What you're convinced of, you're allowed to be able to speak of. They were too, their monies, their livelihoods, their social status was too tied to their religious teachings. They couldn't even speak when they were convinced otherwise. But now Allah criticizes the general population. He says, وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ, and among them are the unlettered, uneducated. Uneducated in what sense? In the religious sense. They have an engineering degree. They could speak C++ if they wanted to, but Arabic is too hard. Quran is too difficult. But if I want to, I can write code like with my eyes closed. I could program entire robots. But the language of Quran, I mean, come on, who has time for that? They chose to be uneducated in it. وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابَ. They don't know the book. And it also means they don't know the law. Kitab comes in two meanings. The book also means the law. And particularly, they don't know the law, illa amani. I prefer, Allahu A'lam, I find more convincing the meaning of law here. Among them are uneducated people who don't know the law of Allah except their own wishful assumptions. Illa amani. I don't think it's this way, I'm pretty sure it's this way. I don't think the punishment is this, that's too harsh. I'm pretty sure Allah is much more lenient than that. I mean, these people keep saying it's haram, haram. It's impractical to call this thing haram. It's just not that bad. Let's just call it a necessity of our time. There's a population of people who are educated otherwise, but when it comes to the religion, they speak out of what they wish it was. Not what it is, what they wish it to be. They'd like to mold it this way or that way or the other way. And in a day and age like ours, this is manifest more than probably it's ever been before. There are people who look at religion like they look at something they're shopping for. It's a consumer product. Well, I want a religion that makes me feel better about myself. And these rules are pretty hard on me. So I feel like if Allah really wants me to be happy, then He'll be understanding that I don't da-da-da-da-da. Really? You feel? If Allah wants you to be happy, like, what religion is this? Is it called Islam, where you submit yourself? Or you want the deen of Allah to submit to you? What did you enter? What did you come into? If you want, and there are people who literally have this mentality where Islam, as we have learned it, is too harsh. We need to loosen it up a little bit. We need to take it easy. Relax. And if it could just, because and there are people that have literally told me if the Quran was revealed today, it wouldn't be this harsh. It's like, wow. Eid Mubarak to you, my friend. Because I will not engage in that conversation. That's way too stupid a conversation for me to because So what is amani? The Arabic definition, يقولون للذي يقول ما لا حقيقة له وهو يحبه. هذا منى وهذه أمنية. They say about something that doesn't actually exist in reality, but they wish it did. That's called an umniya. They have no knowledge of the law, nor any knowledge of the book, except for their own wishful thinking, what they wish Islam was, what they hoped Islam was. They'd like to reinterpret it in a way that's just so much more convenient. It's so much easier. And you know, there are two ways to do that. In the few minutes that I have left, we won't be able to finish this ayah. Two ways to do that, please remember them. There's the unfortunate road the Christians took, and the unfortunate road the Jews took. To take the book and turn it into amani. I'll show both of them to you. And how some of them have made their way into our ummah. لَتَتَّبِعُنَّ سُنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ, the Prophet said. You will absolutely follow the ways of those who came before you. And the Sahaba said, Al-Yahud wa Nasara? Jews and Christians? He said, Faman. To aur kaun? Who else? How did the Christians do this? The Christians did this by saying that Jesus is going to pay for all of our sins, so we don't need the law anymore. Because we are already what? We're saved. Now we didn't do this with Jesus, but a group of us did this with Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah will do shafa'ah. If you said salawat upon him, then the fire of hell will not touch you. If you recited this many times, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that he will make Muhammad of Allah and he will save us from the hellfire, and just show your love to Rasulullah. Now your women don't have to cover, and you don't have to pray 5 times, and it's all good, man. If you're just doing a Naat Khani the whole night, you're good. You're set. If you just show how much you love the Prophet, nasheed after nasheed after nasheed, Maghrib is going on, but you're busy in the nasheed because you love the Prophet so much, ﷺ, you'll be fine. Who does this mimic? This is Christian behavior with Jesus. He's our salvation. Praising Him. Praise Jesus. Now became praise Rasulullah. Salawat upon Rasulullah. So, and salawat is a legitimate thing. His shafa'ah is a legitimate thing, but to take advantage of it and to absolve yourself from all responsibility in Islam, that's the unfortunate road the Christians took. What's the unfortunate road the Jews took? That's another road. That other road is they took the law and they interpreted it over and over and over again, and every interpretation became divine. And the vast majority of them who weren't knowledgeable in the book, they sought out, they asked around until they found someone who could say, what you want is halal. An opinion exists. Some opinion exists. And so long as you can find someone who says the opinion exists, you can wiggle out. So the person who wants to engage in a kind of financial transaction, they're not sure if it's halal or not. They ask the Imam. The Imam says, no, it's not halal. Okay, thanks for your answer. Then they Google on a forum, is this halal? And they get, no, it's not halal. Then they say, I should check out another forum. Another forum. No, it's not halal. Then they go on a Facebook group. Is this halal? No, it's not halal. Man, someone's got to be there on the internet that could just tell me this is halal this one time. And then some obscure group knows all about Islam 99, screen name, says, there is an opinion out there. That's all I needed, bro. Thanks. And he doesn't even stick around to hear the rest of the message. I'm not even Muslim, man. Like, who cares? There's an opinion out there. That we hide behind phrases like, there's a difference of opinion on that. Can you name 3 of the opinions? No, 2. Where did they come from? When you say difference of opinion, I'd love to hear you explain what those differences are. Where did you get that from? Well, I heard. Where did you hear it from? It's in the books. Go read it yourself. What books? Books, books. This is amani. You'd like to construct an imaginary scenario in which you can make permissible for yourself what clearly isn't. What your own conscience is telling you isn't. Illa amani. Wa inhum illa yadhunnun. They do nothing but make assumptions. They do nothing but make assumptions. They'd rather not learn. There are people who would rather not learn. Why not? Because they know the moment they learn, they're going to be held responsible. So might as well just get the easy answer and not engage in learning and be exactly like the disease we just mentioned. If you ask them, why don't you want to learn? Well, I don't want to be responsible because once I learn it, I'm responsible. Wow, I've heard that before. أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ لِيُحَاجُّكُمْ بِهِ عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. That's the exact disease. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect this ummah from falling into this disease. May Allah make us seekers of truth, genuine seekers of truth. And may Allah Azza wa Jal give myself, scholars, teachers, du'at, all of us, the sincerity and the courage to speak to our convictions and to be open to the idea that we may be wrong and to continuously learn. And may Allah Azza wa Jal guide all of us closer and closer to what is true and what pleases Him. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayat wa dhikr al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.